Zara Mihn stood on the observation deck of new terraform station, staring at a sky that would never be hers. 6 months since displacement. 6 months of trying to convince herself this human colony world could become home. 6 months of failure. The Veltharin refugee community numbered 43 on this station, 43 survivors of a species that once counted billions. Scattered across human space in small clusters, trying to preserve culture, language, identity in worlds that felt fundamentally wrong. Heavy gravity, harsh light, constant overwhelming noise. Zara had tried, learned human customs, adopted their patterns, made herself smaller so she wouldn't stand out. It was exhausting. It wasn't working. Her bioluminescent skin, pride of her people, expressing emotion in ripples of light, felt like burden here. Humans stared, asked invasive questions, treated her like exotic curiosity rather than person. She'd started wearing long sleeves despite the heat, hiding the patterns that betrayed every feeling. She'd filed transfer requests that morning. Another refugee settlement, different world, same hopeless search for somewhere that might feel less alien. She was running from nothing toward nothing, but staying here was slowly breaking her. Didn't expect anyone else up here. Zara turned. Daniel Reed from the Cultural Liaison Office. She'd interacted with him dozens of times, paperwork, language assistance, polite questions about integration progress. He was kind, efficient, forgettable. Just another helpful human in a sea of helpful humans she couldn't quite connect with. Except tonight he looked different, tired, alone, an expression she recognized immediately: loneliness. "I was just leaving," Zara said automatically. "You don't have to." Daniel moved to the railing, careful not to crowd her space. "I come up here when the station gets too loud. Figured I'd be alone, but company's okay too, if you want." Zara hesitated. She should leave, should avoid burdening humans with her melancholy. But something in Daniel's expression stopped her, loneliness that mirrored her own. Maybe he'd understand better than she expected. "I don't belong here," she said, more honest than intended. "I don't belong to your world." The words hung heavy. She'd said them before, received the usual platitudes. "Give it time. It gets easier. You'll adjust." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then this world belongs to you now. If you don't belong to it, make it belong to you instead." Zara's skin flickered with surprise, light rippling across her arms, betraying emotion she couldn't control. She turned to look at Daniel properly for the first time in months of polite interactions. "I don't understand," she said. "How can a world belong to me when everything about it is foreign?" Daniel leaned against the railing, considering his words carefully. "You've been trying to fit yourself into our world, right? Learning our customs, adopting our patterns, making yourself smaller. I've watched you do it for months. It's exhausting, and it's not working because you're not human and this isn't your home." The blunt acknowledgement should have hurt. Instead, it felt like someone finally telling the truth instead of feeding false hope. "But," Daniel continued, "belonging doesn't mean conforming. It means making space for yourself exactly as you are and letting the world adjust around you. You're Veltharin. That's not a problem to solve, it's who you are. Stop trying to fit into our world. Make us expand our world to include you." Zara's skin flickered again. Confusion, hope, fear mixing into patterns she couldn't suppress. "Your people don't want that. They have their own lives, their own concerns. I'm just another displaced refugee taking resources." "Some people think that way," Daniel admitted. "But not everyone, not me." The simple declaration, "not me," landed with unexpected weight. Zara stared at this human who'd been quietly making space for her for months, treating her not as refugee to manage, but as person to see. She'd never noticed because she was too busy trying to disappear. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you care about making space for Veltharin culture when you have thousands of refugees from dozens of species all needing help?" Daniel was quiet then. "Can I be honest? Really honest, not diplomatically as honest?" Zara nodded, curious despite herself. "I grew up in the inner colonies." Crowded stations where everyone knew everyone, where privacy was luxury and fitting in was survival. I hated it. Moved here specifically because it was remote, quiet, empty enough to breathe. I understand not fitting into the world you're supposed to call home. I've spent decades in places that never felt right despite being my culture. He turned to face her directly. When you came through integration 6 months ago, I saw someone trying so hard to disappear, hiding your bioluminescence, apologizing for taking up space, asking how to be less Veltharin and more human. And I thought, what a terrible waste. The universe just lost billions of people from your species. Why would we want the survivors to erase themselves too? Zara's throat tightened. No one had said anything like that before. So I've been watching, Daniel continued, waiting for you to stop trying to fit in and start taking up space. But you've just gotten smaller and smaller and now you're leaving. Which is your choice, but I wanted you to know before you go. This world would be better with more Veltharin culture in it, not less. You don't need to disappear. We need to expand. Zara's bioluminescence erupted across her skin, vulnerability, hope, desperate longing she hadn't let herself feel in months. Daniel noticed but didn't stare, just gave her space to feel whatever she was feeling. I don't know how to do that, Zara admitted. I've only ever known how to try to fit in or give up trying. Then maybe, Daniel said gently, we figure it out together if you want. If you're willing to stay long enough to try something different. For the first time in 6 months, Zara felt something like possibility stirring in her chest. The conversation extended through the night. They moved from the observation deck to the cultural archive, Daniel's suggestion, a quiet space where they wouldn't be interrupted. Zara found herself talking about Velthara, really talking, not the sanitized version she gave humans who asked polite questions. She described crystal forests that sang in wind, bioluminescent cities pulsing with collective emotions, philosophy valuing stillness over human productivity. She described watching her world die from a refugee ship, guilt of surviving when billions didn't, impossible weight of being among the last carriers of culture that would probably die within a generation. Daniel didn't offer empty comfort. He acknowledged it was unbearable, that no words made it better, that she had every right to her grief. But he also said something unexpected. Veltharin culture doesn't have to die if you refuse to let it. You can carry it forward, teach it to humans who want to learn, create hybrid spaces that honor both worlds. You think humans would care about Veltharin philosophy? Zara asked, skeptical. I would, Daniel said simply. I'd like to understand what made your world beautiful, not database entries but real things. What made you laugh, what your people valued, how you saw the universe differently than we do. His sincerity was overwhelming. Zara's skin erupted in patterns she hadn't displayed since losing her homeworld, vulnerability mixed with desperate hope. Why do you care about a dead species culture? Daniel met her eyes directly. Because you're standing in front of me, alive and hurting and trying so hard to make yourself invisible. Because your culture produced someone like you, which means it was worth preserving. Because maybe helping you keep Veltharin alive is the most important thing I'll ever do with my life. It wasn't romantic, it was recognition. Pure, honest recognition of her worth, her loss, her right to take up space in a universe that tried to erase her people. Zara realized she'd been so focused on trying to belong to this world that she never considered someone might want to belong to her world instead, to learn from it, to help carry its weight. I was going to leave, she confessed. Request transfer to another settlement. I thought maybe somewhere else would feel less wrong. And now, Daniel asked, now I think maybe I've been asking the wrong question. Not where do I fit, but who will make space for me exactly as I am. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to cautious optimism. You'd really want to learn about Veltharin culture. I'd be honored, Daniel said. Something shifted in Zara's chest, first sense of possibility she'd felt since displacement. Maybe belonging wasn't about finding a world that felt like home. Maybe it was about finding people who chose to make room for you in their world, who saw your differences as valuable rather than problems to solve. And maybe, just maybe, she'd found at least one person willing to do that. 6 months after that midnight conversation, Zara stood on the observation deck again, but everything had changed. The transformation hadn't been instant. She'd canceled her transfer request but struggled with hope that felt dangerously fragile. Daniel started spending evenings with her in the cultural archive, learning Veltharin meditation practices, philosophy, the language her people spoke in light as much as sound. He was terrible at first. Humans weren't built for Veltharin stillness, but his genuine effort moved her more than competence would. Word spread. Other humans, curious about what Daniel was learning, started asking questions. Zara began teaching small classes in Veltharin contemplative practices. To her shock, humans found value in them, especially those dealing with trauma, loss, displacement. She created hybrid spaces blending Veltharin aesthetics with human accessibility, teaching her people's wisdom to a species that never knew her world existed. The refugee center transformed slowly. Bioluminescent art installations inspired by Veltharin design, meditation gardens using principles from her lost homeworld. Small things, but they made the space feel less entirely human, more inclusive of different ways of being. Other displaced species noticed and contributed their own cultural elements. The center became genuinely multicultural rather than human default with token accommodations. Zara and Daniel's relationship deepened into genuine partnership built on mutual recognition and respect. Daniel learned Veltharin ways of seeing the universe. Zara learned that human noise she'd found overwhelming was actually vibrant connection, community expressed differently but no less valid. They balanced each other, her stillness, his energy, her grief, his hope, her displacement, his rootedness. Now, standing where everything changed, Zara realized something profound. She still didn't belong to this world the way she belonged to Velthara. She never would. But this world had expanded to include her, shaped itself around her presence, made space for Veltharin culture within human spaces. Daniel found her there, recognizing the bioluminescent patterns rippling across her skin, contentment mixed with lingering grief that never completely faded. "You're still here," he said, half statement, half question. "I'm still here," Zara confirmed. "Not because this world feels like home, it doesn't and maybe never will, but because someone decided to make it my world anyway. To make space for all the ways I'm different, instead of asking me to disappear into conformity." "You've changed this place," Daniel observed. "The center's not the same as when you arrived, better, more alive." "You changed first," Zara countered. "You made space before anyone else even saw me as a person instead of a problem. You didn't try to fix me or integrate me. You just made room for me to exist exactly as I am. That showed me belonging was possible." Daniel smiled, gentle and genuine. "So you're staying." "I'm staying. Not because I've stopped being Veltharin or learned to pretend I'm human, but because there's at least one person here who sees that difference as valuable rather than inconvenient. And maybe that's what belonging actually means. Not fitting in, but being seen and valued exactly as you are." Years later, when the refugee center had become a model for integration programs across human space, when Veltharin cultural practices influenced human meditation centers across multiple worlds, when Zara had trained dozens of teachers in her people's contemplative traditions, she'd still remember that midnight conversation with perfect clarity. The moment a lonely human told a displaced alien that if she couldn't belong to his world, then his world would belong to her instead. The moment belonging stopped being about conformity and became about recognition, acceptance, and courage to take up space exactly as you are. In the refugee center's meditation garden, designed with Veltharin principles but built by human hands, Zara taught contemplative practices to humans seeking stillness. Daniel often sat in the back, still a terrible student, still trying anyway. His presence reminded her that belonging is a choice made every day. To see each other clearly, to make space for difference, to build worlds that expand to include rather than demanding conformity. And in that choice, repeated daily through small acts of recognition and respect, Zara had finally found something like home. Not the one she lost, never that, but something new and worth building. A belonging not to a world, but with a person who decided her difference was exactly what his world needed. That, she'd learned, was worth staying for.